Hey there, good people, it's your Crippled Critic, and this week I want to talk about a little indie game called Little Nightmares. Little Nightmares is a puzzle platforming horror game on the PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Little Nightmares has you playing as a 9-year-old girl named Six, who's trapped on a strange nautical vessel. You're a tiny thing, and you have to run and hide from these giant, disturbing creatures who are looking for their next meal. It was made by Swedish developer Tarsier Studios, who are known for working on the more family-friendly games in the Little Big Planet series. I've been excited to play this game for a while, ever since it was announced a few years back at E3. It looked simple, but it had that creepy brand of horror I love. When the game was first announced, it was originally going to be titled Hunger. Narrative designer Dave Mervick talked about how the title Hunger was going to tie into the theme of food in the game, as well as the whole grotesque aspect of meat and things about meat that we try to pretend don't exist. Later on in development, the name changed to Little Nightmare in order to tie in with another theme in the game, which is childhood fears. The story and atmosphere in Little Nightmare is probably the best thing about it, but the controls are the worst. There are no customizable controls, but it wouldn't be too bad in a side-scrolling game, except that in Little Nightmares, it uses a lot more of the controller than you would expect. You move with the left control stick, jump with X, and grab onto things with R2, and these are the most important buttons. However, there's a designated crouch button and a separate button to sprint, which seems excessive. The circle button turns on your lighter and brightens your path slightly, but as far as I can tell, it doesn't help you solve any puzzle in the game. Occasionally, you even have to use the camera with the right control stick in order to find certain puzzle items. These controls are way too complicated for a game like this. Side-scrollers should be running, jumping, and maybe grab. Take the game Limbo, for example. In that game, walking and running is already built into the left control stick as a pressure-sensitive feature, and if there's an area where you need to be low to the ground, the game will automatically duck down for you. In Little Nightmares, having designated buttons for each of these things is just a cheap way to make the game more difficult, but it ends up being frustrating, not challenging. Even worse is that there's a lot of timed puzzles in the game. Some puzzles require you to turn a crank, then run and jump past the door before it closes, sometimes while an enemy is chasing you. During these moments, you can be pressing up to 3 or 4 buttons at a time. You can never really tell when you're going to have to press this many buttons in each puzzle, so it can be kind of a pain figuring out when you need to prepare for them. A good portion of the game does require you to use stealth to get past certain enemies, and this aspect of the gameplay is the most engaging part. Mostly because the stealth in the game is more about strategy and figuring out the right timing, not pressing as many buttons as you can. Also, I want to give a heads up. For the most part, Little Nightmares does play like a traditional side-scroller, but every once in a while, the game lets you move your character in the foreground and background of an area, presumably to let you explore and find more hidden puzzle items. Unfortunately, I found it was very confusing trying to make very precise movements, especially on like a tightrope or a very thin pipe. I ended up falling to my death a lot because I couldn't see where I was going, and no thanks to the limited camera angles. One last thing I want to mention about the controls and gameplay is that Little Nightmares doesn't have a great autosave feature. The game doesn't allow you to save on your own, so you have to wait for the eyeball symbol on the bottom right hand corner to pop up in order to let you know when the game is saving. What's bad is, when the game chooses to save, it's pretty random, which means if you die, there's no telling where you'll end up. When you're revived, you can wake up right where you were left off, or in the previous section of the game. It just depends. This can be frustrating, especially if you're having trouble getting past a certain puzzle. It's a bit of an understatement, but the controls in Little Nightmares are not very forgiving for disabled gamers with fine motor skill impairments. Though it was a struggle, I was able to get through it, only with the help of the PlayStation 4's accessibility options on their console. If you don't have this option, I feel like disabled gamers are going to have a lot of trouble. On the visual side of things, Little Nightmares is very dark, but there's a brightness feature in the options menu you can change to your liking. I didn't notice any important puzzle items that were distinguished solely by the color red and green, so I think colorblind players won't have much trouble. Unfortunately, gamers with hearing impairments will definitely have problems. If you've been watching my videos for a while now, you probably know that I believe most horror games lose a lot of their style and atmosphere when you can't hear the soundtrack. But where they'll really have problems is with the stronger enemies in the game. In order to get past them and figure out when to hide or when to run, there are audio cues that each of them give that you need to hear in order to get past them. The creepy janitor's sniffing noises, or the fat Baker twins' yelping noises are all required things you need to hear to figure out their next move. Without the help of an able-bodied person, I just don't think gamers with hearing impairments or deaf players will be able to complete the game, and that's a problem. Thankfully, there isn't any spoken dialogue in Little Nightmares, so there's no need for subtitles. Still, having captions in the game really could have helped. It's a shame, because the story and atmosphere of Little Nightmares is top-notch. It never really gets terrifying, but it's definitely creepy. Little Nightmares is a really short game. You could probably beat it in about 4 or 5 hours, but the story is really weird. It's slow at first, but once it gets going, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by all the twists and turns. Little Nightmares' style is entirely its own. You haven't seen anything like these monster designs. They're awesome and disgusting. My favorite was the creepy janitor monster. Having no eyes, his long gangly arms, and that really weird skin mask, he was nightmare fuel. The type of horror Little Nightmares is inspired by, it's all over the map too. At first I definitely saw inspiration from European folklore, the fear of dirty, grimy butchers, akin to something like the film Delicatessen. I also saw these little creatures in the game that remind me of the Huldafolk from Icelandic culture. But by the end of the game, I even saw things taken from Japanese horror. In fact, some things seem like they were taken straight out of Spirited Away. Fans of Hayao Miyazaki will definitely see similarities. The end's got an Asian bathhouse with pig monsters gorging themselves on food. It even has a mysterious woman in charge who has magical powers, just like the movie. That was crazy to see. I ended up really enjoying Little Nightmares despite the terrible controls. It's creepy and got a great story, but I just can't ignore that Little Nightmares is not disabled friendly at all. In every way possible, gamers with fine motor skill impairments are going to have trouble, and deaf players may not even be able to get past certain parts of the game on their own. Great effort on the style and atmosphere. I just hope that Little Nightmare developers learn from this, and next time make things a little more accessible. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Tell me what you guys thought of the game in the comments below. Were the controls as bad as I experienced? Anyway, as always, I will see you later.